The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
All right, joining us now to discuss is Denelle Dixon, CEO of the Stellar Development Foundation. Welcome, Denelle. So you had the privilege of participating in this week's hearing in Congress on the future of digital assets. I wonder what were some of your main takeaways?
Thanks for having me here. This is a ton of fun. The first thing is it was awesome that they engaged with us, and it was real engagement across both sides. And they spent a lot of time asking a lot of questions, and they felt like it was that they were in listening mode, which is exactly where you want them to be. And this was a real shift, and this felt really good. So there was a lot of focus on stablecoins, some focus on understanding just the value and what happens with respect to these transactions, and what are people looking for in the industry. And so I think that what we're seeing is this shift in Congress, this recognition that this is a really important sector that they need to focus on. And so I'm just really excited. My key takeaway is that this is the first of many, and that we have to get prepared for more engagement, more education, more opportunity to really let Congress and other folks in the regulatory environment understand that taking any of this away from their constituents would be a real harm.
Did you get a sense that they had a better idea of what crypto's about? And do you think that if that's the case, do you think that will benefit or hurt the industry? We have Gary Gensler, who taught courses in crypto, now running the SEC, and he's not exactly Mr. Warm and Fuzzy when it comes to crypto.
Yeah, I do think it's important for us to continually engage, and I do think that they come away from it with a better understanding of it. I think that, the conversations that we had on the record in the room, and also conversations that we had off the record outside, provides a lot of really good questions, but also a really good focus on what are we missing here, and why is there all of this negative energy that's focused on crypto and blockchain, and how can we shift that debate? And I really do think that we've shifted it. So it's incumbent upon us. I've said this over and over and over. Industry has an obligation to educate. We did the same thing back in the early days of the web. We can do it better than we did then, but I think it's the same thing to make sure that they understand the technology stack, but more importantly, so that they understand the activity and the use cases that's happening, so that they focus on the activity layer instead of the tech stack. Because if you're you want Congress and you want regulators to focus on activity, because if they don't, then they focus on technology and try to regulate on each technology, and you don't want that to happen. You want it to be what activity is happening, where are there gaps in the current legislation, where are there gaps in the current regulation, because the truth is a lot of what happens in crypto and blockchain and even in DeFi is covered by a lot of regulators here in the US.
Yeah, overall, Denelle, I got a sense that it was very productive, very exploratory in the hearing. There was a little bit of bad energy, if you might say, from Brad Sherman, maybe a bit from AOC, in terms of addressing some real criticisms about, why wasn't Brian Armstrong there? Why did they send their number two? Why wasn't Tether there at all? And why are the fees on exchanges sometimes quite high? I wonder if you had a chance to talk to Brad Sherman or even AOC, Alicia Ocasio-Cortez, about their skepticism around the crypto space.
I didn't outside of the hearing. I think here's the challenge that we have. You're always going to have folks that have some information, and that information is going to color their understanding of it. And all we can do is continually press and press and press about what is the value here, what is the activity here, and how can we actually, we need to encourage Congress and others to understand that this activity is really not that different than what's actually happening already in the traditional financial infrastructure, other than it's happening in a decentralized manner. And decentralization, as we know from the internet, is not a bad thing. It's a positive thing. It offers lots of opportunity and lots of innovation. And so I think we need to do that more and more and more. And you're always going to have skeptics. My favorite part is trying to turn the skeptics into folks who at least understand and at least believe in it.
So who wasn't there that should have been? Christine just mentioned Brad Sherman. Were there any executives you felt like
Tether and Brian Armstrong?
I mean, whoever it is, was there anybody you think should have been there but didn't show up?
Look, I think that
or
this is
wasn't
the
invited?
first. Yeah, I think this is the first in many. I think that they did a really good job. They had the protocol, they had Stellar, they had the exchanges, they had two exchanges, they had the stablecoin issuers, two of them. So if you think about like they couldn't, if you have more than that in terms of the panel, and there are a lot of members on this committee, they each have 5 minutes. That hearing would have gone longer than potentially the 5 hours that it did, which was really long. So I think that the representation was there across the board in terms of
You,
the different participants in the ecosystem. And I think that's a real positive. There were some elephants in the room. There was a lot of talk about Tether, but I think that you had what we're focused on is really good activity around what we can do to protect the ability for stablecoins to be issued. And that I think is a real win.
you think Ripple should have been there? Craig Wright? Anybody?
I think that,
Yep.
again, having the different individuals in the room that represent the industry participants is a really good thing. There's going to be more, and there's going to be more opportunity for others to be present. As
So,
Christine mentioned at the beginning, they're going to have a Senate side hearing, so there's going to be opportunity for others to engage.
so what do you think was their biggest worry overall? I mean, you kind of you mentioned it a bit, but like if you had to step back and you had to say, okay, this is what I think ultimately is Congress's biggest worry about cryptocurrency and about the blockchain space, what would you say it is?
I think that the biggest takeaway from the concern standpoint is consumer protection. And I think that what they are constantly trying to figure out is there sufficient consumer protection here? I mean, you heard lots of them talk about, is there notice? Is there opportunity for consumers to understand the technology? And I think we need to be able to really separate that out a bit and say consumer protection statutes are applicable to everyone across the board. All of these entities have those obligations to be fair and reasonable with their consumers and to be able to provide notice. I think what we also so we don't need to like fix that part of it because there's already the opportunity there for that to happen. But what we do need to do is be able to pull that thing, that strip through about literacy. That was the other thing that you heard. Is there enough understanding and knowledge of this ecosystem? And one thing I'd like to say is I don't think everyone needs to understand the underlying technology. We just need these use cases to have really good UX and UI design. And when we start to get to that and we start to pull folks through the use cases with really good UX, UI, and in context notifications, they're going to see a lot more of what they see already today in the web. And I think that that's going to be a lot better for that. So the consumer protection and this literacy piece is the one thing that I think kind of goes across both sides of the aisle.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I also sensed an undercurrent of, concern regarding, what will these cryptocurrencies do to upend potentially the dollar? And in that case, should they be developing a digital dollar? What would that look like? And I wonder how you may be able to weigh in on those kind of conversations.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, Christine. Across the board, there was a discussion around the dollar and protecting the dollar as sort of the currency outside the U.S. and in the U.S. I think that what we were able to do during that hearing, and I think that we could make more inroads here, is to really demonstrate how actually stablecoins that are one-to-one backed and have that consumer protection angle and really focused on giving the value to the consumer, they actually support the growth of the dollar, even outside of the U.S. One of the things that I see constantly in our business, and we have over 20 stablecoins on Stellar network, but with the USD coin, so Circle's coin, when it became available on the network, it was something that companies outside the US really, really wanted to leverage. It's in high demand to have a USD coin that is actually leverageable everywhere in the world. So I think that actually supports the supremacy of the dollar. And I think we did go pretty far in recognizing that all of us care about that and that it's something that's already being supported through these really strong stablecoin providers today.
Do they find, or I mean, have you heard from any members of Congress any concern about, for instance, algorithmic stablecoins and its potential instability, rather?
Well, I think that there was a tremendous amount of focus on the one-to-one backing, which would be a challenge for algorithmic. So I think that we didn't get into the details of that, but I do think that what we're already seeing in the proposals that have come out, and certainly in some of even the proposals that we support, is that one-to-one backing with the with fiat and with the U.S. dollar, so that there's, at least when you're talking about U.S. dollar currency tokens. So that is an important piece of really creating, again, that trust and that consumer protection. So again, there wasn't a focus on that, but given where the discussion was moving on stablecoins and stablecoin regulation, which who knows if that's going to happen in the short term or the long term, but this is something that they felt more comfortable with respect to the one-to-one backing.
Yeah, from when they asked SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, CEO of FTX, about his thoughts on stablecoins, he mentioned perhaps there should be more attestations, a lot of independent audits potentially in the future. Is that where you sense the conversation is going towards stablecoins?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, and I think that we already have really, at least the two providers that were there, and there are others that really focus on that public attestation and that auditing. And I think we're going to move to the extent that we see regulation here, it's quite likely going to have some kind of requirement around, I don't know if it's going to be daily, but certainly regular attestations about where what the value sits. And I think there's going to be a requirement also that it be sitting in insured depositories, so that there's going to be sort of this relationship with the existing and the traditional banking infrastructure as they hold the assets that back the token.
And do you think a new regulatory agency or a new body needs to be created to address digital currencies? I also heard from Brian Brooks that wasn't necessary. Just deal with the many regulators that are available right now. And if so, which one?
Yeah, so I think it's really hard to create a new body that's focused on this. Again, I like to think about regulation in terms of the activity. What is the activity that you're trying to focus on? And most of this activity, as I said, is already is under these different regulatory agencies today. The way that we've certainly thought about it and talked about it is that we think the OCC could actually stand up and be the agency that regulates the stablecoins. If they actually created legislation around the requirements about what a stablecoin issuer would need to do to be called a stablecoin, that you could put that with the OCC or potentially in collaboration with some state regulatory agency as well. So I think that there's then the activity around what happens with those stablecoins. It could be regulated by other agencies. Once it gets into use in terms of other things. But the underlying coin itself should probably be at the OCC level. I agree with Brian that there should not be another regulator. If we do that, we would have done that for the early days of the web too, right? This new technology was something that there was a lot of fear about way back 20 years ago. And there was this thought, do we need to create another regulatory regime? And we had some restraint we saw some restraint with the government then, and I'd like to see similar restraint today.